Welcome to Tell Me More, the all-steel podcast where design meets innovation and we explore the limitless potential of workspaces. In this exclusive series, we're peeling back the layers of workplace design. From the psychology of colors to the future of hybrid work, join us as we open doors to conversations with industry leaders, architects, and designers who redefine the modern workplace. This is Tell Me More, brought to you by Allsteel, because when it comes to designing the future, there's always more to discover.
Hello, welcome to the Tell Me More podcast. My name is Lauren Gant, and I am a Senior Workplace Advisory Manager with Allsteel. I am joined today with my very good friend and colleague, Rikki Crowe. Hi, Rikki.
Hey, Lauren.
Thanks for joining me. We are in our second episode in our mini-series about trauma-informed design. Last time, Jordan, Arnold, and I talked a little bit about, the human responses to trauma, what we defined what trauma is, and walked through some of those responses. In this episode, Rikki, I'd love to talk a little bit about how we take that knowledge of trauma and the ubiquitousness of trauma, and talk about how we translate that into design and how we foster this sense of well-being and safety and empowering easy navigation through the space.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, awesome. So let's start from like a super high level. Could you talk briefly about why you think it's important for us to even be thinking about how the design of workspaces impact humans within those spaces?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think so. If you just start, not even at the workplace level, just everyday environments really set the mood, set how we interact with space, how we interact with each other, right? So how you start your day, how you go throughout your day, and how you end your day, the spaces and those environments are really impacting you. Most of the time, we're not aware of it. It's something that just naturally happens. But the reality is we as people that create workplaces can start to look at it through another lens, right? We can start to say, we know that the spaces that we create do affect people, can support people. So as we do that, as we think of it in that manner, we can kind of layer in this idea of trauma, right? And how can we dissuade trauma through the built environment, through the places that we provide for people to interact with day to day. I mean, one of the things that I often talk about with people, I think partially because people are always surprised at what we do for a living. They're like, that's a job. And I'm like, yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
But I also point out that you probably spend more of your time in an office than you do in your own home. So we want to make sure that those environments are really supportive for people. I think the other thing too, from the employer level, is if the holy grail is productivity, we want to make productive spaces. So we want to make sure that we're creating spaces that aren't hindering anybody for whatever reason it might be. So.
Yeah. And I think, I think about walking into a space, and that's really a corporation's first opportunity to sort of communicate what they're all about, right?
Exactly.
So walking in, seeing what the space is like, seeing how you feel, what the vibe is, for lack of a better word, but like that sort of like tells you a lot about the workplace without ever having to like read the manual or, impart the culture. That's sort of our first chance to say you matter, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that we talked about, Jordan and I talked about, was this idea that we don't often like to talk about the experiences of trauma, what happened, but we like to talk about sort of the human impacts and how that comes up for us in an involuntary and also very human way. And we talked about these 4 modes of dysregulation: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So, given that so many people have had traumatic experiences, and given that there is this like real, very normal response to feeling some sort of way in the office, trauma-informed design then tries to take some of that learning and make a space feel great. And we sort of talk about these two ways or two phases that we practice this idea. And that is, first and foremost, we want people to feel good navigating the space. We don't want to intentionally or unintentionally activate anyone or make them feel uncomfortable. And then the second phase would be, how do we allow people to recover in the space,
Right.
if they should be feeling the need to step away and sort of take care of themselves. So let's talk about that first phase. That I like to say, designing to dissuade dysregulation. We're not going to prevent it, right? But there are things that we can do to dissuade dysregulation.
Right.
And I think when we talk about this, like, we like to first take this big, global view of how people understand their environment through their senses. Do you want to talk a little bit about like some of the ways that we're thinking about this environmental or this like more global view of the workspace and how people understand?
I think in general with workplace, right, it's never just one thing. There's usually multiple layers in things that are like additive or I guess subtractive that we're kind of looking at it. Things that ultimately like all add up to one thing or can create a thing. So, when we've talked about it before, just like when you're thinking about the environment, I mean, you touched on it a minute ago, like navigating a space. I mean, that's something that is probably the easiest thing from a design perspective that we can do to help dissuade dysregulation, I think.
Yeah.
Knowing how I get through a space, just in general, is going to make me feel better, right? It's going to make me not have to think about something too much, because I think that's part of it, right? If you start to move into a dysregulated state, the more frustrated you get, probably the more activated that you would get. So navigation through the space. And there's so many ways that we've talked about it, like not having these weird dead ends where I don't know what's around. I mean, even simple things of like when you're in a larger space with slightly taller ceilings, being able to clearly see like, oh, that's a collaborative space, or that's a quiet space, or that's an access or an egress. They're little things, right?
Right.
It's these. I think the thing that I appreciated the most out of the research that you did for this was like, there are things that designers are already naturally doing.
Yeah.
So really what we're just saying is like, after you get through SD, let's just take another quick look at, could I improve it just a little bit more? So,
Yeah, I actually love that, because I think, and we'll talk more about specifics, but I think I do sense that designers are feeling a little bit like, oh my gosh, I have another thing I have to learn. And like, I have to be an expert now in sustainability and in wellness and in, I don't know, hybrid work. And now I have to do this too. And I think you're dead on. Like, we're already thinking about the ways that humans are in these spaces, and just with like a little bit of like extra knowledge, a little bit of intentional sort of digging through the floor plans, we can help.
Yeah, it's little
Amp
tweaks that
that
can
up.
have such a huge impact on somebody. And that's that's what we're trying to do, right? Like we're trying to make people feel good. I mean, it kind of even goes back to like, if you're just looking at, again, through a productivity standpoint, it's like, if you have the right tool for the job, you don't have to think about it. It's just there. It just works, right? Just works.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do, but through an additional lens of trauma, right? We all have it at some level. We all have some sort of a reaction. I mean, the more that I've talked about this content, the more I realize I don't know why I do it. I don't know what necessarily activates me, but I can tell you that I fawn a lot. I do it quite a bit. The second I start to get frustrated, I will fawn. And because I
Just
just
do
want
your
to
thing.
like,
We'll just do
like
it. Yeah.
I'm out. I'm just like, yep, sure, cool. So if you ever hear me say that to you, I'm probably fawning at you. I digressed there. But yeah, I mean, I think again, nobody has to be this like hyper expert. This is not to the level, I think it could be, but at a base level, designing like trauma informed design isn't super heady. It's something that people are already somewhat naturally doing, but I think we can just be a little bit more thoughtful about it,
Yeah.
right? A little bit more understanding of, because part of what we start to do too, right, is like when you take that bird's eye view of the floor plan, is how do we give multiple opportunities? for people to find the place that makes them most comfortable and most supported. People will just naturally go to those spaces. I mean, we've kind of talked through this before of like, what level of communication do you have to have for people to understand some of these spaces? But I think the reality is most of it is just intuitive. You will naturally gravitate to the thing that makes you feel the most comfortable, makes you feel the most supported. And so that's why looking at the entire ecosystem and saying like, how do I spread that out? How can I give the right amount of variety? Because I think we all know like every single space isn't going to be completely different. Like from a facility standpoint, that's just not going to be most people's reality. But how do we create just enough variety that everybody can kind of find that spot for them?
Yeah, and I think like that viewpoint gives us two like takeaways. And one would be it's not sufficient to just put a wellness room in and say like we did it. Like check the box. It's also not necessary that all spaces have to do all things for all people, you know, all the time. So I think like it's twofold, right? It's not as simple as we have a quiet space, and it's not as complicated as everything has to do everything.
Yeah. I will say though, wellness rooms are amazing spaces because they can support so many people for so many reasons. At the same time, they are typically an afterthought and aren't as comforting as we want them to be. This is not a plug for us necessarily, but the response that we get for our wellness room here in Chicago, we were just kind of like, I mean, I think it's a beautiful space, but it's anytime somebody sees it, they're just like, this is so nice. And so we had to step back and be like, okay, what was special about this space that we did that's not being done? And it's simple things as having a little bit of color in there, having really soft shapes on the wall for sound. Like, you know, I like to point out because sometimes people don't remember, but like wood is biophilia. We have some wood shelves in there.
Yeah.
But it's a very nicely curated shelf of a variety of things to support people. And so that's what I think people are responding to is it's not a clinical space. It feels thoughtful and intentional versus I checked the box and I've got a wellness room in my area. So
and it's not a huge space. It's not giant, but there is enough
not a ton of
space
furniture
for a soft seat that somebody could lay on, and also enough space that somebody could have space on the floor to do prayer or yoga or meditation. It's just very intentional, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to jump forward to re-regulation, but it is my plug for why a wellness room should have enough space on the ground outside of yoga. If somebody needs to really literally ground themselves, laying on a couch is great, but is a completely different sensation than putting yourself on the ground, whether it's sitting or laying on the ground. If you really need to feel centered and anchored, having enough space on that floor to do that is really important. So you want to be able to leave a little bit of space. But I also think to your point, it's like, even if you're not using the space to re-regulate, some people just want to do a little yoga. Like you need a little stretch. So
movement is good
movement is great. So I think it's one of those things that, wellness rooms are great. It's not the only solution, but it's a solution in the entire kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think if we back up just a little bit, like I think when someone enters the space, they're sort of taking in what they see, what they smell, you know, what they hear, and that's giving them a lot of cues about how to navigate the space and also like their sense of safety in the space. So I think like something as simple as like, does the space feel well taken care of? Like, or are there stains, or is it dirty? And like something as simple as that is meaningful to people in the space.
Very much so. I mean, and so much of that is somewhat of a maintenance thing, but it's not something that you can ignore. I mean,
but it could also be like, does the space feel super clinical or institutional? And
right.
that
isn't
like
so
a totally
far to
different,
one side or the other. But I do think it's really interesting. The lighting and the smell thing is something that is somewhat easily controlled, right? Because we've talked about this, like the smell of bleach can be comforting for some people because they feel like they know it's clean. but it can be the exact opposite for other people of like, what happened in this space that it
Yeah.
smells like bleach kind of a thing. Like there's various reasons why bleach might not be a great smell. So it's an interesting smell is such an interesting thing to me because what can make one person feel really good can make somebody else feel really bad. So it's kind of like weighing that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like we've talked about this a lot with this content of like there's a lot of tensions that start to happen with one solution versus the other. So there's not, I mean, it goes back to that there's not one perfect answer to any of this, but there's little things that we can do generally to kind of help people. So, I mean, I think the idea of like a space not feeling too sterile or clinical, everybody gets that, right?
Hmm.
There's minimal and then there's sterile, and those are
Yes,
two very different things, but there's a
totally.
fine line sometimes between them. So, where is that warmth? Where is that comfort, right? In that space.
Yeah. And I think that very much leads to your what you brought up about biophilia. Like a lot of people think biophilia equals plants,
Green
and
plants.
and
Yeah.
that is part of it, but that's
Mhm.
not the whole picture, right? And so, thinking about incorporating natural materials like wood, thinking about different heights of ceilings. Do you have areas that are,
Yep.
you could see out of a long way, areas of prospect? Do you have areas that feel a little bit more cave-like?
Yep.
And it makes it
Compression and
feel more
release is a
human.
nice thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's nice to have a big open airy spot, but then sometimes you need that little bit of compression to make you feel cozy and comforted. Comforted. Um,
I like it.
I
Let's go with
talk
it.
about this a lot that like people love a cave. People
Yeah.
love to feel wrapped in a cocoon no matter what state you're in, even in your if you're in the perfect state of mind, like there's just something naturally that we tend to gravitate to those spaces. At the same time, we need that breath of fresh air. So that's where, from an architectural standpoint, I mean, it's a lot more fun as a designer to be
Yeah.
able to play with spaces like that, but to intentionally place them in spaces so that I can easily access them, come and go as I need to. That's kind of what we're trying to point out to the design community.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, the global senses, environmental senses.
Mhm.
Talked a little bit about layout. Let's talk a little bit about furniture. Like,
Mhm.
what are the things that we touch and feel and like really physically interact with throughout the day? You want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're thinking about regarding furniture in this conversation about trauma-informed design?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'll start to sound a little redundant here, but variety is king, right? How much variety is going to be dependent on the amount of square footage that you have that you can really kind of manage within that space, but it's really thinking through it's not always an enclosed space, right? Sometimes it's semi-enclosed, sometimes it's open. So again, people will naturally gravitate to those areas.
Hmm.
People will naturally gravitate to areas of semi-enclosure or open collaboration because they want to be able to see what's out there, or they want to be able to leave easily
Yeah.
and it not be something that's obvious. I think that's something maybe we haven't touched on as much. So much of what we're trying to encourage is creating spaces that people don't have to ask. They don't have to
Yes.
tell
Yes.
that something's
I don't
happening. And
have to
so
disclose that I'm in this like
exactly.
state right now.
So
Yes.
that's what like a semi-enclosed space can do for somebody. I don't have to get up and open a door and leave that space. There's also something naturally like mentally that can be calming about that, knowing that I have an easy access out. I love the whole concept of side by side seating. I love some of the
Same.
storytelling that
I
you
love
have
it
with
too.
that. Not being a parent, I'm not as aware of this, but it makes sense. The whole idea of people that sit side by side, you tend to be a little bit more vulnerable. And so I know the story that you often will share is you can have a more emotional or have a conversation with your child in the car that they probably wouldn't have with you if you were sitting across the kitchen table. And I think that
Yeah.
that resonates a lot, right? Like,
You kind of lose that power dynamic.
yeah,
You're not like, it doesn't feel as confrontational. It's a little
right.
bit different vibe.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's like not having to look somebody in the eye is a whole thing. You're willing to say something. And so I love being able to recreate side by side moments in the open plan. Like in collaborative spaces and social spaces and meeting spaces, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be around a table. It's like I can easily create a banquet. I mean, everybody loves a banquet. I think some of the examples that we had created too is like if you have a back-to-back banquet and you have tables on either side, maybe only one side of banquet with tables has chairs on the opposite side, whereas the other doesn't. Again, you're not having to ask somebody to sit next to you if you choose to sit on the side
Yeah.
that doesn't have chairs.
Yep.
People will just naturally go there. And so you can just gravitate to that. You don't have to ask.
Yeah.
So things like that. It's
I've heard
funny
people
because
say, sorry, I've
no,
heard people say too, like this, I get the same feeling when I go to a baseball game with my buddy and we're sitting
yeah,
next to side by side at a baseball game, or if I'm sitting at the bar at a restaurant instead of at a booth in the restaurant. So I think like this idea, we do it a lot without intentionally thinking about it,
mhm,
and not and we're not saying like never do face-to-face conversations, but
no,
like how do we offer opportunity? And I think this is one area that overlaps really nicely with the neurodiversity
yep,
conversation,
yep,
so that what we're doing for and like also like even if I'm not in a trauma response, some days I'm just trying to keep it together, and I can do that until somebody like very kindly says like, Lauren, are you okay? And then I like lose, like melt in a puddle. No, it never happens. I'm not emotional at all, right, Rikki?
you've never gotten like that. But we
Anyway,
have our days. We had
just
that day on Monday. You saw it. It was fine. I just needed to get it out
it's all
there,
right. We're bringing our whole selves to work.
Yeah.
Um, the point is like these things that we're doing that feel very specific for this conversation actually, I think, benefit everybody
Right.
and in multiple
Right.
ways. Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, it's one of those things that's like, you start to see that interesting overlap between trauma-informed design, neurodiversity. I mean, and even in all honesty, there can be overlap with that physical diversity
Yeah.
as well. I mean, part of what we're really talking about is what are the different lenses that we should be looking through that are things that make us a little bit different, but really everybody benefits by having that variety of choice,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So me being able to choose if I want a squishy seat or a more task-oriented seat is just allows me again to have that autonomy to understand that I have the tool to do my best work,
Hmm.
right? Because that's what it all, in the
Hmm.
end, when we're talking about workplace, at least outside of workplace is different, but when we're talking about workplace, what we're trying to do is make people feel supported and productive.
Yeah.
If you have to like make something work for you, if you have to manage through something, you're not going to be as productive. You're not going to be as creative. You're not going
Yeah.
to be as engaged. And so that's ultimately what it comes down to for me is that like I want people to feel like they can be engaged. I want them to feel like they have access to other people, that they can be super creative. Because that's, I mean, the vast majority of knowledge workers, that's what we're doing. And so how do we create spaces that support that,
Yeah.
and it's little tweaks.
I love that so much, Ricky. I just love working with you on this topic because you bring this passion to the floor, to our conversations that is so compelling and just really impactful.
You know what though? I think part of it too, and it's like I joke and say like, oh, I'm a workplace snob, because I've always had the luxury of working in beautiful environments. Working for an office furniture manufacturer, we have beautiful offices and beautiful showrooms, and I've been in other people's workplaces that I walk in and I cringe. I'm just like, how did you suck all of the life out of a space?
Yeah.
You feel it when you walk in. And I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of like, it's been a long time since they've updated, but other times it's just like, you can tell we're just slapping workstations in there
Yeah.
and it's butts and seats get work done. But that's not reality, right? I mean,
Right.
I think, I've been talking about this a lot, especially with younger designers, of having been in this industry for 20 years now. There's been a huge evolution, right? What we
Hmm.
were talking about in workplace 20 years ago versus now are night and day. And I really love that we are finally focusing on the individual and not just, you know, what storage piece they have. It's like really how do we
Yeah.
make sure that we're supporting them as people? That's the bigger focus now. And that's what makes what we do a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting, and a lot more varied,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Well
that's
said.
why it's kind of fun.
I agree. And I think like it's more than just like the space is not inspirational or the space is not, doesn't look nice. It's like if if I'm splitting my brain every day to figure out like how do I find the spaces that support me, or if I'm worried that I'm not like I need a moment to collect myself and I don't know where to go, like that also impacts my ability to be creative, to be productive, to
Yep.
socialize in a meaningful way. So I think, it's easy to say like this is like a nice extra to think about people, but it does ultimately impact productivity as well.
100%. And I mean, it's been one of those things too, where it's like, if you look at workplace through the lens of generations, the one thing we can definitively say about Gen Z is that they care about and talk about well-being, especially mental health and well-being, more than any other generation. And
Yeah.
so every organization talks about attraction and retention, right? So as that workforce, as more of them move into the workforce, they not only expect their organization to support them, they want to be shown how they're supporting them. And that's not just, oh, you have access to this, health insurance thing. It's like, how is the space supporting me? Because when you look at, K through 12 and even higher ed,
Hmm.
there's a lot more spaces that they're creating within those environments so that people have access to, remove themselves from a situation or kind of get that recharge. And so if they don't start seeing those spaces within the workplace, they're going to find the companies that are doing it, right?
Yeah.
So is it this huge overhaul of your workplace? No, but it's just, again, looking at it through another lens so that people feel supported.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think as we, have walked through this, we briefly covered this idea of we need to be thinking about inherently making the space feel good for a diverse population of people coming into the space. We need to also be thinking about dysregulation or allowing for recovery from dysregulation.
Yep.
And that's going to look different depending on, if you're fawning, like, Rikki mentioned, or if you're fighting. I'm not a fighter, but I'll say if I'm fighting, and we can talk about more of that. We have a ton of content on our website too, with idea starters and more details about this. But I just love where this conversation has gone about this idea that this is really a human thing, that it touches everybody in all of the spaces they're working. Is there anything else that you would like to add to this conversation at this point, Rikki?
No, I mean, again, I think it's just more that repeating of it's like, I think the vast majority, when you really dig into some of the kind of best practices that we've outlined, this isn't necessarily recreating spaces. It's
Yeah.
just taking that extra look. It's that extra thought, It's the same as you would with physical diversity. It's like, I got through SD. I'm just going to look and see, like, could I maybe open up that aisleway a little bit more? Am I being thoughtful about where these spaces are, where the wellness room is? It's not directly across from like the CEO's office or even directly on a major pathway, right? It's just trying to be a little bit thoughtful and
Yeah.
very much respectful of the fact that designers have quick turnarounds, but take that 30 minutes, right? Take that hour to just kind of rethink about that space, because the impact that you can have on the human experience can be huge if you just take that moment to kind
And
of.
I have spoken to designers who, I've presented to them on this topic, and they said I didn't have a name for this. I was trying to
Mhm.
do this and I didn't know what it was
Yeah.
called. And so I think, if you're doing some of this already, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what ideas you have to share. And hopefully we can, continue to progress this conversation. I learn something new every time I talk about this. Rikki, you always give me these great ideas. We have these great conversations about this. So I appreciate you being here with me today, and look forward to our continued work on this topic.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we will continue the conversation on the next episode of Tell Me More. So please come back and join us. Check out our website for more information, and don't hesitate to reach out if we can help. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another fascinating episode of Tell Me More. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of design and innovation. If you're hungry for more insights and stories, make sure to subscribe to Tell Me More on your preferred podcast platform. As we sign off, remember that the conversation doesn't end here. Connect with us on social media at Allsteel and share your thoughts, questions, or even your favorite moments from the podcast. We love hearing from our engaged and curious audience. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue exploring the Design to Do More philosophy. Until then, thanks for listening.